everyone. Welcome to another Changing Conversations on SGS Live, where we are moving towards a better, safer, and more interconnected world. I'm Leanne Nielsen, Communications Specialist with SGS North America, and in today's conversation, we're going to be talking about coastal resilience and natural disaster repair, rebuilding safe and healthy communities. The intersection of flood cleanup, unpredictable weather patterns, and the built environment means the need for effective environmental testing is rising. Through rainfall, flooding, wildfires, and other effects of changing climate conditions, our analytical testing services offer support through crucial decisions. Before we introduce our experts, I'm going to throw it out to everyone watching. I want to know who is joining us today. I'd love it if everyone could drop your name in the chat. Tell us where you're watching from, what country or state or province you're in, what organization you're representing, and let's get this conversation going. I'm excited to be here with you all, and there's a lot to talk about with my SGS expert guests, and I'm so excited to introduce them. First up, we have Karen Maxwell, Sales Manager, EHS. Welcome, Karen.
It's great to be here. I'm Karen Maxwell, and I'm responsible for leading the business development efforts in the West region for SGS, and also ensuring that there's client awareness of all of SGS's capabilities in North America. I also help coordinate large laboratory supports for incident responses, which typically involves streamlining the procurement of lab services when an environmental cleanup effort requires multiple laboratory locations, either due to the large capacity of a sampling event, maybe the complexity of the analytical testing scope, or even just reducing some of the challenging logistics that come with the recovery in remote areas, like in the case of wildfire cleanups in the mountains or even hazardous waste cleanups with train derailments in more rural areas.
Well, it's great to have you, Karen. And
Thanks.
next we have Ryan Sutliffe, Senior Sales Account Manager. Welcome, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. As Leanne said, I'm Ryan Sutliffe, and I started with SGS as a lab analyst, analyzing asbestos and mold samples. And then from there, I managed a laboratory in Las Vegas, and now I'm part of the West Coast business development team as account executive, trying to use my lab background to form a better partnership between the lab and the client.
Awesome. Welcome, Ryan. And our final guest, General Manager, EHS, Josh Grindstaff. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Leanne. Pleasure to be with everybody. I'm Josh Grindstaff. I'm responsible for the built environment business in North America. This includes labs all across the United States. And I started with SGS about 3 years ago. My background spans R&D chemistry to chemical manufacturing, and I'm really looking forward to this good dialogue this morning.
Well, it's going to be a great discussion today, so let's just get right into it. Karen, I want to ask you off the top about a term I'm hearing lots about, the Great Melt. What are we talking about here?
Well, 2023 in California started with record rain and snowfall throughout most of the state. I think we all know somebody who is impacted by those storms in some way. For me personally, my neighbor's land was flooded for over 3 weeks, and we were getting really nervous about our property as the days went on, and the water kept coming closer and closer, and the storms just kept coming. And that parade of wet weather is what dramatically built up California's snowpack in the Sierra Nevada mountains. For those of you outside California, that's our natural water storage system for the state. So when it melts, it provides water to millions of people, farms, it fills our reservoirs. But when it melts too quickly, it causes flood management concerns. And we had a stunning amount of precipitation this year. So we've been really hoping that we don't have the same type of flooding coming up that we just all went through this winter and spring, and even the type of flooding that you're seeing on the news right now in Vermont, even in the last week. So the day-to-day weather is what's driving how quickly our California snowpack is going to melt. And May and June were pretty favorable when it comes to slowing the snow melt, but it's all going to run off at some point. And we know communities in the lower lying parts of the state are already on alert.
Such a fine line between needing that water and everything just melting too quickly.
Yeah.
Josh, it sounds to me like flooding is not only a problem because of the water, but also because of what the water can leave behind. So can you talk to me about the importance of mitigation of the risk to public health, environmental impacts, and to support effective remediation strategies for affected flood areas?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll piggyback off what Karen said about stunning rainfall. I'm based in Los Angeles right now, as you all know. Southern California is notoriously known for being in a drought at all times. But as of this month, the state of California has received over 150% of its annual rainfall already. Now, this equates to 5.3 trillion gallons. So for folks to just put it in your mind, that's like 1.6 million Olympic-sized swimming pools dumped onto America's second largest city over the course of 3 months. So the state is becoming wetter, and it's likely to certainly have impacts on two major areas for the population moving forward in California: is public health and environmental. On the public health side, floodwaters certainly contain a variety of harmful microorganisms that could impact the public health. And on the environmental side, it's certainly known floodwaters can contain a variety of pollutants, the runoff, the residual effects from the flooding. They can have a harmful impact on the environment. Now, once we have an idea of the risk, microbiological testing, can further enhance and help the remediation plan, and with the goal of really alleviating and mitigating the public health and the environmental impacts.
So interesting. And the scale is crazy when you break it down like that. And it's great to talk about these remediation strategies and what we're all doing to help repair communities experiencing all of this. But now it's time to get our audience involved. We've got a poll with no prize, unfortunately, but it's still fun to play. So this is a question for everyone watching. What type of mold is commonly associated with water damage and flooding? Is it A, Stachybotrys, which is black mold, B, Penicillium, C, Aspergillus niger, or D, Alternaria? And you can put your answers in the chat now. So let's see if you guys know this one. And while everyone's answering, Karen, what do you think people are going to say?
Well, let me see. The environmental community, the mold community, they're a smart audience. I think if you gave them a list of 100,000 types of mold, they're probably still going to nail it.
Yeah.
But yeah, while we're rating, let's see. Fun fact, the mold community knows this, but the first answer, Stachybotrys, that can be different colors depending on environmental conditions and what it's growing on. So again, important to get it under a microscope before you call it Stachybotrys.
Got it. All right, Karen, I'll let you reveal the answer.
Okay. Well, I don't have access to a drum roll, but of these 4 molds, and this is very suspenseful, letter A, Stachybotrys. That would typically be a result of water damage, and usually over time with a continuous water leak, for example. But, after water damage, all 4 of those molds can appear on walls and surfaces. So probably the more complete answer would be all of them.
Well, I love it when you do a little bit of a trick question, but who knew mold would get everyone talking so much here today? All right, Josh, let's get back into the conversation. Does floodwater contaminate other water sources? And what about damage to buildings? What are our customers looking at?
Well, let's go back to California. It is such a relevant example for the purpose of this conversation. So we talked about all those Olympic-sized swimming pools, the amount of water, the sheer amount of water that came down into California. As a result of that, 400,000 homes were impacted by this flooding, with the average impact of about a foot of water across those. So in your mind, think about 900 football fields full of homes that were all impacted in a very dense metropolitan city. So it's no surprise that mold was really the number one major impact in many of those buildings due to that water damage. Our customers were and are still are on the front lines in California here, working to address the contaminants left behind, addressing the damage to these buildings, with the central focus on 4 main aspects. Certainly facilitating getting those samples to a proper lab for testing, removal of the debris, treatment of the contaminated soil and water, and of course, subsequent helping with the repair of the damaged buildings. Now, SGS certainly is a key component in terms of providing expertise to ensure that this testing is absolutely accurate and timely. And that really is the central part of the mitigation strategy that really helps people's lives get back on track.
Yeah, and flooding and its effects is really something that can impact anyone. I'm interested to know actually if anyone in our audience has been affected by flooding. Do we have anyone from California or other affected areas watching? Let us know in the chat, but I just knew that our audience would be interested in this topic. Thanks so much to everyone for joining us today for this SGS Live to talk about coastal resilience and natural disaster repair, rebuilding safe and healthy communities, or more simply put, the great melt in the built environment. Don't forget there will be a Q&A at the end of this interview segment, so feel free to keep dropping your questions and comments in the chat. Now I want to turn things over to Ryan, who I know is a real expert in this field. So Ryan, why should we be concerned about the risks associated with water issues?
Yeah, sure. I want to pose a couple of questions here for the audience to start. The first being, does anyone really know how fast mold typically starts growing? From there, we all know and have heard about scary black mold, but is that the only thing we really should be scared of here? And it sounds like a bit of a rhetorical question after kind of the trivia question there, but the media has done a great job of informing us just about black mold. But now, what if I told you that mold growth typically only needs a bit of moisture to start forming? And when you combine that with a hot, humid environment, you have a recipe for disaster. When floodwater enters a building, it can saturate walls, floors, carpets, and other materials, creating an ideal breeding ground for mold. Now, historically speaking, people start to notice mold issues when visible mold covers areas of your home. You can see when you have mold, okay, now you know you need to clean it. But the reality is that when you see mold growth, you already have a number of underlying issues. Since mold growth typically occurs within 24 to 48 hours after a flood, mold spores start to thrive in these moist environments. Now, I mentioned the scary black mold everyone knows about, like Stachybotrys or Chaetonium. But what if I told you, as Karen said, there's 100,000 different types of mold? Think of it like a number of drink combinations you can get at Starbucks. Your triple white mocha with caramel drizzle, 3 shots of turbo, everyone's favorite. But there's so many different types of mold. That's why it's such an issue. Not every mold has the same reaction for each individual person. I'm talking like allergic reactions, respiratory problems, or sometimes even infections. These are the issues that can develop in healthy people. So imagine the effects on immune compromised people in these environments.
Okay, so now that you've broken down the risks and scared us all a little bit, how do you see the solutions happening?
Yeah, sure. Well, it first seems like now the drought's going to be over in California, right? No, but in all seriousness, there's a couple of things to keep in mind here, all in combination with working with an environmental consultant and accredited lab like SGS. The first thing being that you want to set a baseline or starting point for your project with some sampling. If everything is clean, then you're lucky. But if you indeed have mold growth or other potential contaminant, you're going to want to get that taken care of, or what we like to call remediated. So now that you know you have an issue, what do? Well, you want to identify and remove the source of the moisture. Post-flooding, that can be a number of things: fixing leaks, improving ventilation, reducing humidity levels, keeping in mind that depending on the level of contamination, there are a couple of things you have to keep in mind, like do we need ventilation? Do we need dehumidifiers? And from there, you can collect more samples or post-remediation, see if the cleanup was done properly or not. If the samples come back clean, you know you're entering back into a clean environment. But if not, maybe more cleanup is necessary. Again, the goal here is indoor air quality back to a safe level for the occupants.
Gotcha. And it's great to see how solutions focused this team is. Once again, if you've just joined us, we are talking about coastal resilience and natural disaster repair with my guests, Josh Grindstaff, Ryan Sutliffe, and Karen Maxwell from SGS. Don't forget there will be a Q&A at the end of this interview segment, so feel free to keep dropping your questions and comments in the chat here. Josh, can you speak to the issues that can be addressed with the proper laboratory testing?
Yeah, let's go to just one that really impacts everyone. That's society, helping people get back on track, a light at the end of the tunnel for folks who have been greatly impacted by flooding. I'll use Los Angeles again as an example. The 400,000 homes, those, all of those homes were impacted, but every one of those homes had a family. And because mold was such a major problem, many of those folks couldn't go back in their homes. And they were waiting on insurance claims. All right, the microbiological testing absolutely was a critical component in helping to ensure that the homes were safe. People could get their insurance claims approved. They could get back into their homes and get on with their lives. It really, at the end of the day, was a core component in being a beneficial aspect of society, helping people move forward. This really, if you step back and you look at the microbiological testing at a 50,000 foot view, it cuts to the core of benefiting society, helping people move forward. And that's where SGS comes in. Our expertise can really ensure that testing is accurate and timely so that folks can get back on track.
Okay, so Karen, how important is it for clients to be able to access that data quickly so they can make better decisions in these crucial situations?
Well, like Josh was mentioning, the importance of testing and really the urgency in getting testing done as soon as possible. There's also urgency in getting final data out of the laboratory, because you have to imagine when you're a consultant or a contractor with everything they have going on in the field, the organizing, the scheduling, balancing all these moving parts, the last thing they want to do is wait on lab data. Late data can bring active job sites working on a recovery to a complete standstill. As a lab, we know this. So we give our clients access to data online and 24/7 in near real time with our Engage web tool. So it might be 2 a.m. and our clients know that we've committed to have staff and scientists reading samples or running instruments overnight. But because it's after hours, maybe difficult to reach someone by phone or email, this tool eliminates the need to call and ask for data or even wait until the lab opens in the morning for a formal report to be generated. So it just essentially allows for a more rapid assessment of sample results, and that helps our clients make quicker decisions on next steps to the recovery process.
Awesome. And I'm going to ask you both to comment on the following before we get started with our Q&A. So we've talked a lot about the aftermath of a flood event, but how do you help during?
Well, sometimes before a disaster is officially declared or you even hear about it on the news, we're already in the laboratory analyzing samples to assess the potential damage and help contribute to the cleanup effort for the contractors that are in the front lines of the event. So we help first by reserving capacity in the laboratory for soil, water, and air samples that are en route to the labs. And we also rebalance staff workloads to ensure that we've got the right departments properly staffed to turn around data quickly as soon as it comes off the instruments and microscopes, and it's been validated. So taking it a step further, when these sampling events are in more remote areas, nowhere near a fixed laboratory, we help on the logistics side too by setting up maybe courier relays. So our lab courier then meets one of the contractor's couriers midway to help expedite the process of getting samples into the laboratory while still maintaining the quality controls. So lab staff are really committed, and we know that these are important sampling efforts. They have to be handled very carefully since it's really difficult for contractors to have to go back out to a site and resample if the original samples have any kind of quality issues in the lab. We had a lab director once transporting samples herself, and she actually blew a tire on the road. This was, before there was rideshare or anything like that. So she hopped on a city bus, and she actually, was frazzled, kind of clutching the little cooler in her lap. And one of the passengers, probably noticing the tense situation, actually asked her if it was an organ for transplant. I mean, I think it was just a few soil samples, but point is the labs are very committed to sample integrity. So when you just don't want to risk sample transport issues, it's also within our scope abilities to set up a temporary sample management office right near the site for longer term sampling events, which kind of helps keep the contractors focused on their efforts in the field.
Ryan, I see you nodding along there. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. Karen, that sounds like a bit of a different type of public health issue there.
Right. Yeah.
But to build off of what Karen is saying, this information is vital in determining the extent of contamination and potential health risks associated with floodwaters. We like to call it like a partnership between the client and the lab, right? And so a lot of times the lab is supplying data as quickly as we can in a matter of a couple of hours. We've also done on-site laboratory analysis when vital infrastructure needed to be cleaned up, reopened as quickly as possible. I myself traveled down to St. Thomas after hurricanes ravaged some islands down there. So I brought like a bunch of microscopes and opened up a temporary lab on site to get some of the vital buildings back in operational as quickly as possible.
Wow, it's so great to hear that we're making more services available to those who need them when they need them. And while we're on the topic of natural disasters and rebuilding, I have to ask this group about something that's so prevalent in our environments and our media right now: wildfires. I'm here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and we've had a very smoky summer so far from wildfires. What effects are you seeing on the West Coast, Karen?
Oh, yeah. We've been watching that on the news for weeks now. And I mean, we could probably host an entire SGS live event just discussing the impact wildfires have had on the business of lab testing. There's perimeter air monitoring, monitoring the ambient air, personnel monitoring to ensure worker safety during excavations, soil water testing before and after debris removal when each of the parcels are undergoing cleanup and restoration, even particle identification and combustion byproduct testing in support of insurance claims to get people back safely into their homes. SGS supports all that type of testing, and we've been heavily involved in wildfire investigations and cleanup for a number of years now. So, I mean, we're talking rain and flooding today. So remember, Josh mentioned earlier, the LA area got a year's worth of rainfall, I think, in just the first 2 months of the year. So more rain means more vegetation growth, more fuel to burn when it dries out over the summer. And our wildfire season, at least in this region, officially starts next month. So unfortunately, yes, the Western US states know wildfires very well.
Yeah, I'll jump in with one more thought. The team at SGS has over 50 years of wildfire analysis experience, and it's a really great example of how SGS can provide testing. It really helps people, again, get their lives back on track. When wildfire affects a community, the smoke will inherently affect the homes in that community. It'll get into their HVAC systems. It'll get into their carpet. It'll become a hazard for the home. And folks need to be able to get insurance approved, and they need to be able to know that their homes are safe. Many of our projects involve this type of work, and through our expertise in testing, those people can find a solution. They can find the light in the tunnel through our testing.
It's awesome. And Karen is right when she says we need more time to talk about this topic. So stay tuned with SGS to see how we're mitigating wildfire risk and working with those who've been affected. I know we've had some questions submitted from our audience, and everyone is eager to talk to our experts. So let's get started with our Q&A. We'll start with the question number one. Question for Ryan. With so many government policies, regulations, and rules, what does this mean for our clients? How do they keep up?
Yeah, absolutely. Consistency and policy, I'm sure, as everyone knows on this in the audience, play a crucial part of testing for any potential client. You're going to want to make sure you're using an ISO 17025 accredited lab like we have at SGS. These accredited labs must adhere to rigorous quality control procedures, standardized methods, proficiency testing, and validating testing techniques to establish protocols. Choosing an accredited lab reflects your commitment to high standards and quality of data. This in turn helps the client have confidence in the data, and these results will carry more weight and credibility going forward.
Confidence in the data is really key here. So next question is for Karen. Say a potential customer comes to you with a problem to solve. What happens next, and what are the timelines around getting them up and running with solutions?
Well, I mean, we work primarily with environmental professionals who are experienced and well-versed with emergency response efforts. But a typical starting point for an environmental testing project would be a simple call or email to their point of contact in the laboratory in order to order containers or media for collecting samples at the impacted site. And this is done in a more collaborative way than, say, just ordering equipment from a vendor, because the laboratory acts more like a partner on the client's team. We are more involved with the overall quality goals of the project. So I like to think of it as a compass and a navigator. The laboratory providing data is a compass. It serves as a reliable guide, pointing towards various directions or possibilities. But like a compass, the lab data alone isn't sufficient. You need the navigator, the contractor, or the consultant to interpret those readings and apply their experience and make judgments accordingly. So we work together in unison through all the unexpected twists and turns that inevitably come with these types of restoration projects. But yeah, to answer your question, the timeliness to a solution setup really can be almost immediate if you already have an established relationship with a lab.
Awesome. Okay, got it. And this next one is for both of you. Can you highlight some examples of situations maybe where you've helped clients become more resilient in the face of water damage? Ryan, maybe you can go first, and then Karen, if you have anything to add.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned before, we're able to treat mold issues before they become visible, right? So air quality data may show that water actually intruded your walls before you see visible mold growth. In one particular instant, mold spores kept showing up in the air samples but were not visible in the room. The consultant was able to go back in this space, conduct more in-wall testing, and pinpoint the issue as it was actually an in-wall water leak. We had the same kind of thing happen with some of the Las Vegas Strip casinos, where consultants saw no visible mold growth in the walls themselves, on the walls themselves. But as you come back with the air sampling data from the lab, you kept seeing mold spores. So the hotel decided to open up one of the walls, and then they realized, oh, we actually have a water leak, and that was the culprit.
Yeah, I like Ryan's example there, when lab data steered the investigation and pinpointed the source of the issue. For me, I think the biggest contribution to helping really all of our clients recover from a water damage scenario is just providing defensible laboratory data in a timely manner to get them quickly back into their homes. The most important role that the laboratory has in that process is adhering to a strong quality system in the lab, because like we keep saying, the data we produce is used for critical decision-making that ultimately mitigates risks to public health. So second to that would probably be the ability to provide that same data quickly. So we're doing our part to speed up the recovery process. I participated in a number of these cleanup projects over the years, and it's always been really inspiring to watch the news of these communities returning to normalcy afterwards, and just knowing what a vital role my team had in that process.
Yeah, I love what you said about seeing these communities return to normalcy and rebuilding safely. But we're going to have to stop things here, even though this is a topic we could chat about for so much longer. We're just out of time today. I would like to thank my guests, Ryan Sutliffe, Senior Sales Account Manager, Josh Grindstaff, General Manager, and Karen Maxwell, Sales Manager, EHS for SGS. Thank you so much for talking to us about natural disaster resilience and repair. It's been so great to have you all and speak with us and answer questions and really get this discussion going. So thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank
You're welcome.
you. Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
Great.
We're so glad you were here to be a part of this interesting and informative session. If you want more information, you can either visit our website or scan the QR code that's now on the screen. I'm Leanne Nielsen. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.